This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 8 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. When I first started in radio, I worked in music radio. And I was amazed how many, being from New York, I really wasn't familiar with the whole Nashville scene, but then working here in the South, I suddenly became very aware of the Nashville scene. I had totally misunderstood the whole scene. I thought it was all, I guess what you called country western music when we were kids, right? But it was everything. It wasn't just country music. And now I find out that, but it's not all pretty, right? Yeah. Right. Anytime there's something that's attractive, it's always going to attract something that's not so attractive. I think this is a true story. It's a book called Monster City: Murder, Music, and Mayhem in Nashville's Dark Age. It's written by our guest Michael Arntfield. And if this is a true story, then I'm glad I was doing radio in Ocala.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh! Good morning, Michael. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Morning. Thanks for having me on. And it is absolutely a true story.
Oh, is that right? Where are you?
Currently, I'm in London, Canada, which is about an hour from Detroit.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for being on there with us. Is everything true? Is the Rest Stop killer? Is he true? Is that a real guy?
That's a real guy that Bruce Mendenhall is his name, and he was just actually put away while the book was being written on his most recent murder. And there's still about a dozen we think he's good for all over the U.S. And it just happened that he came to Nashville and got caught there.
Is Pat Postiglione? Is that the real name of the detective?
That's his real name, yeah, Postiglione.
Okay, thank you. So tell me about the story. Tell me, and if you could maybe slip in there how you became involved with this story.
Sure. So the story begins in the late 70s. Pat, the protagonist, real-life detective, he comes back from Nam. He goes back to his native New York. He begins doing the HVAC systems for the World Trade Center. When the construction started there, he decides to go on vacation to Nashville, and he stays there, becomes a cop there, and ends up catching more serial killers than any detective living in America. And I meet him in 2016 when I get invited by the State Department and the Vanderbilt University to go be a visiting professor there. And I'm a former cop at that point. He's a former cop. We end up meeting for a drink by chance for the most part. And he tells me these stories, and I realize, A, I'd never heard them. B, they need to be known, and C, it's at the very least one book and probably more. And I mean, you could write many books, and I've tried to jam them all into one for now.
So the fact that the Rest Stop killer had a new part to his story added while you were writing this book, did you have to backtrack and change some of the book that we were talking about?
Most of it played out while I was writing it in real time. So there was no changes that had to be made. The only change that had to be made, and this is a very concerning development, is the one murderer, or the one alleged murderer, I should say, just had his charges dropped and is out walking around now. So I had to put in a disclaimer, and he is, it doesn't mean that he was acquitted. It means that for now they have chosen not to prosecute him. So there was some wording I had to play with there. And I mean, that when people read that, I think it can come to their own decision about whether he should be in jail or not.
And what's interesting about the story in the book is that these weren't active cases, they were cold cases. And that really takes a lot more doing, I think.
Right. And I mean, this was one of the first cities in America to have a full-time cold case squad. And this is really when DNA sort of came around, and all of a sudden they had 50, 60 cases that were live cases again. And some of them are 30 years old, but they knew these killers were still walking around, and they had the evidence, they had the technology all of a sudden to start solving these. But as the book progresses, you'll see most of them were solved actually without DNA. They were solved using really inventive, old-fashioned detective techniques that I think, a lot of people told him at the time he was crazy to be doing, and he proved them wrong, and he caught these people. And Nashville is a better city today because of it. Really?
Does exploring the profiles of the people who are the victims help to discover who the killer is? Is there something that is there a clue in who the victims are or what they did for a living?
That's a great question, and absolutely, that's something that really crystallized as an area of forensic expertise during this period, which is what we call victimology, which is you can, from the victim's occupation, from their habits, from their lifestyle, from their routine, from who their friends are, you can begin to reverse engineer a composite of what the offender might have been motivated by, or who they might have been, and how they entered the victim's life. And that's really now an area of study that we understand is so important, especially in a cold case where, as I say, the name of the killer is usually identified in the first couple of days, and it's just a matter of that no one has recognized that they're the killer because they're already in the victim's life.
And there's really no way to predict anything because the locations are so different.
That's right. And I mean, the other thing I talk about in the book is they began experimenting with geographic profiling, which is now another area of scientific sort of study. And they were just sort of figuring it out as they went along. They were pioneers in terms of the techniques that we now take for granted. And the fact that none of these stories had been told before now, I'm not sure why, other than I think people want to have this very different version of what Nashville is. And again, as I stress in the book, it's a holiday destination now and a retirement destination because of a handful of people who caught these killers.
And I can see why the Chamber of Commerce wouldn't want murders being a story that we associate with Nashville. I have a copy of the book. It just came out 2 days ago, so it's very brand new. Call me if you'd like the copy I have. The rest of us have to go buy it. Michael, can you direct us to a bookstore or book website that you prefer?
Amazon.com is always a good one-stop shopping, and anywhere fine books are sold, Barnes & Noble, places like that should be stocked up all over the U.S.
And you have your very own website also.
That's right, michaelarntfield.com, and you can get more information there.
All right, very good. Michael, thank you for being on the air with us today. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster.
It is time for you to go! It is time for you to go!
Protesters have taken over Senator Chuck Grassley's office this morning. He chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee holding the confirmation hearing for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. He's sitting down for more questions from members of that committee today. Yesterday's session lasted 12 hours with dozens of interruptions by protesters. White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders says the anonymous writer of a New York Times op-ed claiming they're among a resistance within the administration holding the president in check should quit their job. Figuring out who wrote that piece is now a guessing game.
A spokesman for Vice President Mike Pence says he didn't write the op-ed, tweeting, "Our office is above such amateur acts." Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also issued a denial. President Trump is demanding that the New York Times reveal the identity of the writer for national security reasons.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland in Washington. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Are you taking Viagra and tired of paying $50 per tablet? Marley Drug has generic Viagra for just $10 per tablet. $10 for generic Viagra is a savings of $40 per dose. Call now and get free shipping on 10 tablets or more of generic Viagra. Marley Drug is a North Carolina pharmacy licensed in all 50 states. For information, go to marleygenerics.com or call us at 800